All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining A Case of the Mondays, part of the Tennessee Holler News Network. Here in Tennessee, we are glad to be coming with you live today with retired Lieutenant General John Glad Castellaw of the United States Marine Corps. How are you doing, Glad? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, I'm having a great Monday.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to have to get some better branding, I think, because Mondays usually aren't that great. We'll definitely get some more upbeat music, I think.
Good.
So we're going to talk a little bit about last week. This is last week on Monday. The president-elect announced some foreign policy positions to his cabinet. As we spoke earlier, the job of the incoming administration is going to have to replace some of the brain drain that's occurred over the last 4 years. And this week, they'll be doing that with domestic cabinet picks. But this week, we're going to talk about the defense cabinet, the transition for the administration, and your thoughts on the assassination of an Iranian nuclear scientist and what challenges that poses for the president-elect. But first of all, being in the military, you have a front row seat of how the military can provide humanitarian assistance. You led humanitarian operations in Africa, Asia, and many other parts of the world. How does the military interact with our Department of State? President-elect Biden announced Anthony Blinken, a former Obama Deputy Secretary of State, as the incoming Secretary of State, replacing Mike Pompeo and Rex Tillerson before him. How does the Department of State work? How does it interact with our military? How does soft power complement our work around the world?
Well, it's easy to say, the Department of Defense and Department of State have a long teaming relationship. I worked in the U.S. European Command in Stuttgart, Germany, and I worked in the U.S. Central Command, also next door to the Pacific Command. And, each one of those locations, you've got diplomatic representation. You've got an ambassador usually that's had a lot of experience. And so he's right there when the commander of that particular geographical kingdom makes decisions and gives inputs. Plus, when I led U.S. forces in East Timor, as we were part of a 27-nation team that went in to restore peace and stability, I worked closely with the U.S. ambassador to Australia and the U.S. ambassador to Indonesia, and also people like Ambassador Holbrooke. One of the worst, and I hate to use the word, but it's more descriptive, ass chewings I ever got in my life was from Holbrooke in Dili, East Timor, because he didn't think we got out enough with the people. So the relationship between the Department of State and the Department of Defense has been, I would say, close and a good working relationship. What the state brings to you is diplomacy, which is an element of national power. People talk about soft power, but I talk about national power. And when you talk about national power, you got diplomatic, economic, cultural, and military. Okay, and they all work together, and they may, in relationship to each other, change in the ratio, but it's all about taking a national power, unifying it, coordinating it, and leading it on so that you can achieve what our national objectives are.
Right. And those national objectives were being achieved in the first Obama administration. There was a surge in foreign service officers that were being hired at the State Department. That number has atrophied as more foreign service officers and senior foreign officers have been retiring or quitting on the job under the previous two secretaries of state. So how do we expect the incoming administration to look at the diplomatic corps going forward? What is our national character going forward?
Well, the new, Sec Def or Sec State designee and a lot of the others that are being brought to bear of great experience. And they've already started talking about how they're going to restore the Department of State to reestablish, the morale, to place the importance on state that should be. So I think we're looking with great optimism at a sort of a rebirth of the State Department. And it's not about bringing or going back to how it used to be. It's about how do we take what's happened in the last few years. This is an opportunity to remake the State Department and have it where it can be most effective against how the environment is now. So I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to see a resurge in the people that are going to flow into the Department of State, because it's going to be a place to be, to make a difference in the world and for the United States.
Right. And my vast experience of watching spy movies and war movies, what I do know is exactly what you said. You can't change the environment that you come into. And so the Biden administration is now coming into an environment that they can't control, with Iran in particular, and the alleged assassination by Israel of a nuclear scientist. So what do you expect the Biden administration's position will be? Will they try to negotiate a new nuclear deal with Iran? Will there be close alliances with Israel and so forth? What do you expect to happen on that front?
Well, I had the great opportunity. You talk about Department of State people and their dedication to the job. I was involved with a couple of organizations, the Nuclear Security Working Group and the Iran Futures Group, which were operating out of George Washington University, the Elliott School of Diplomacy. And I was flying wing on a great lady, Dr. Jan Nolan, who has had great experience working with the diplomatic community, working in nuclear policy, working in policies that support the security of this great nation of ours. And I had the opportunity to go in and talk to a bunch of senators and about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, which is commonly called the Iran Agreement. And what we had was not a perfect document. Very few documents are ever perfect, but it was certainly, by all accounts, was having an impact on delaying Iran developing a nuclear weapon. And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, we do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Iran is a foe. It's not a friend of ours. It is supporting organizations, some state, some not state, with advanced technology to kill Americans and others of our allies. So it's not that we're trying to give them a good deal or to accommodate them. What we created the JCPOA for was to support our national interest, our objectives. And so what we're seeing now with some of the assassinations, with the sanctions, some of the actions that are being taken, is narrowing the paths available to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. It seems that this administration is intent on leaving only one path available to the Biden administration, and that's a path to war. And we do not want to take that path. And I don't think those other nations in the Middle East that would be impacted want to either, nor our allies in Europe or Asia. So it's unfortunate that when the Biden administration comes in, that they may find that their options are greatly narrowed. And it's going to be a challenge on how to continue ahead and avoid a war that I don't think anybody wants.
Right. And shifting from the Middle East a little further east to Asia, where you also have experience as Chief of Staff to U.S. Central Command at the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but going even further than that in North Korea, Has the Trump administration's relationship with Kim Jong-un been healthy or productive? Is it something that a Biden administration can even continue?
Well, I've been going to the Western Pacific and East Asia since I was a second lieutenant. My first operational command was as a platoon commander in the 3rd Marine Division operating out of Okinawa. And my job there was to train 49 hard charging Marines to operate amphibious vehicles. And when the horn blew, to go to the Korean Peninsula first to stop the North Koreans coming south and then to roll them back. I came back in the next decade as an aviator with the same mission, to take my aircraft to the peninsula and to fight the North Koreans. And then, the 3rd decade and the 4th decade, I came back. I was a general officer, and I spent a lot of time preparing to go to Seoul and start evacuating 125,000 people. When you look at the difference between the South Koreans and the North Koreans, you have South Korea, which is a democracy, and it's got a very vibrant economy. And then one of the things I also had to do was go up and inspect the positions along the demilitarized zone in Panmunjom. And you stand in the positions on the south and you look to the north, and it's devastation. They've cut down all the trees, all the grass is grown, and from intel reports what's going on. And this year is going to be an especially bad one because North Koreans, in addition to dealing with the normal lack of food and other sustainment, have got a pandemic going on. And over all these years that I've been going there, it's been the same routine. The North Korean leadership will wax to hold out, the carrot, and then when we try to take it, then they bring the stick in. They'll have nuclear tests, or they'll launch missiles and so forth. The only priority that the North Koreans have is to maintain the family in power, and they know that what makes them special right now is having nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. And it's hard to believe that they're going to give them up. So what's going to happen, I think, with the Biden administration, they're going to come in, they're going to restore, the relationships and that we have with the South Koreans and with the Japanese and other countries in that area, and we're going to build up the relationship again. And we're going to do the best we can to contain the North Koreans until something breaks. And whether that's next year or 10 years or 20 years, that's what we will continue to have to do.
So over those 30 or 40 years that you were active in that area, the 60 plus years since the Korean War, it seems like the only leverage that we have been able to build up are those multilateral relationships with neighboring countries. But it seems like the Trump administration simply tried to, or rather President Trump himself thought that he alone would produce more leverage than all of those relationships with neighboring countries. Is that an accurate assessment of the last years?
I don't think anybody can be a buddy with the North Korean leadership. What they're focused on, as I said, is staying in power. They'll use that kind of relationship for their own measures, and they have. They burned down one of the buildings at Panmunjom. They're good boys for a little while, and then they turn into the bad boys that they really are. And the key, eventually, on what happens with the North Koreans is China. The North Koreans depend on China for their support. And when China decides it's time that they've had enough and the world has had enough, then they can apply the pressure that will make a difference with North Korea.
Yeah. And so President-elect Biden has named Jake Sullivan, a former Barack Obama appointee, to be the national security advisor. Linda Thomas Greenfield, I think, surpassed Pete Buttigieg as a potential nominee to the UN, as ambassador to the UN. And then I think most interestingly, and something that you can speak to, because in addition to your lengthy resume, you serve on the board of the Center for Climate Security. And John Kerry, former Secretary of State, is going to be a special envoy for climate. What do you think this means for the fight against climate change and for everyday Americans even understanding the importance of the link between climate and national security?
Well, one of the things that I don't think we all understand is the various roles that we can play in national security, and not be in uniform, or not be a diplomat, not have a particular government role. And one of those areas is taking action that will reduce greenhouse gases, that will reduce the impact. Just this morning you saw that again, they're rethinking the number of names for hurricanes because of the records we've set. We know they're getting more intense. The numbers are increasing. So the impact is there. So how can we encourage our fellow Americans to do that? Putting somebody like John Kelly with his, or John Kerry with his statue is a good way to do it, to show the emphasis, at the cabinet level. And also it falls to us. One of the things that we can do right here in Tennessee, and it can start here in the rural areas of Tennessee, is with how we farm. And we're starting to see a lot of farmers adopt conservation measures that reduce the amount of carbon that's released from the soil to the atmosphere by conservation tillage, minimum tillage, reduced tillage, by using cover crops, by using rotations. And what that's going to be able to do is that, soil is the biggest sink where we can put that kind of stuff. And so by encouraging policies, and I think Kerry and who it's going to be brought in at the USDA do that, then that is a battalion or division or whatever that we can use to fight climate change and to reduce the impact it's having on us. This serious business. The Center for Climate that I'm with and security, some great studies. We did one on what's happening with our installations on the East Coast. Norfolk is sinking. The water level of the oceans are rising. We're pulling water out of the ground, so the ground is subsiding. And so we have a multi-billion-dollar set of installations at Norfolk that are under risk because of that. And that's here in the United States. The other element of that, and why we need to be forward and why we need to have those relationships with others, is, for instance, I spent a lot of time in Western Africa, Lake Chad Basin. And what we're seeing there right now is with the Sahara coming south a mile a year, with the drought increasing, is that you're driving the herdsmen south into the farmers area. You're driving the fishermen off the Lake Chad as the water recedes, and you're setting up conflict between those three elements that is being used by terrorist groups as sources of funding and to create chaos. So I am very happy to see the emphasis that the U.S. administration seems to be putting on fighting climate change.
So for the Tennessee farmer who is working to reduce his or her carbon emissions, that has effects all around the world. But at the end of the day, it could help reduce conflicts where that farmer's son or daughter could be deployed in the next 18 years.
Yeah, I've said it many times. The most valuable treasure that we have, as Americans have, is the blood of the men and women who serve in the military. We need to make these long-term investments that we have been reluctant to do in foreign assistance, in diplomats, in economic support for other areas, in forward presence that will start solving those issues before they get down to the point where we have to make that decision to put that blood at risk.
Very well said. And I should also add that your expertise is not only militarily, but you received a degree from UT Martin in agriculture and a commission in the United States Marine Corps. Also note you played freshman basketball, and it seems to have all gone downhill since then. A distinguished 36-year military career that took you all over the world. But now you're back in West Tennessee working on agriculture issues. So is there a way that the incoming USDA and even the Tennessee Department of Agriculture can help support farmers as they pursue mitigating measures for climate change?
Yeah, I think that ag policies need to reflect support for those practices. We already have the NRCS, which is the Conservation Service, supporting elements like that. We need other policies in USDA to go even further. So, what the soil is all about. And, my family came into North Carolina 300 years ago, and they moved to Tennessee 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And so we've been farmers for 300 years, and all of us from father to son have been passed that we're stewards of the land and we've got to take care of it. So it's not just about, pushing down all the trees and tearing up the soil and pouring fertilizer in it. It's also, how do we have regenerative agriculture that not only produces the food and fiber that we need, but at the same time maintains that land, increases its value, increases the amount of organic matter it has, increases the amount of carbon it has in order to pull it out of the atmosphere, so that we have this for future generations. So I am optimistic that whoever is the next Secretary of Agriculture and those that he works for them will produce policies that will support that.
Indeed. And that's a good note to end on as we look to this week. There should be more domestic cabinet picks from the Biden administration, and we look forward to hearing from them. As for now, Lieutenant General Glad Castellaw, thank you so much for joining us on A Case of the Mundays.